Hey, this is Ravenwind.
Hello! Y'all know who I am.
I'm just rolling my eyes. Like, it's not even a minute in. And it's like, you're like, I want to try not to cuss this podcast, so I'm just going to be ridiculous instead.
Guys, I'm determined to not cuss the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
We'll
see. We'll see. Mm-hmm. You're listening to the Feather and Bone podcast, two witches talking about everything witchy and nothing at all. And today, we're going to be talking about the famous and infamous Gerald Gardner.
Gerald, you say?
Yes. You and I have and I want to kind of start this podcast by saying that,
the podcast
by saying that, we're not bashing him. Like, we understand. Well, we're going to bash him, but we understand. Like, we don't deny the fact that he was instrumental in Wicca. You know, in what people are practicing today. What we have a problem with is that it's built on lies. You know,
like my last marriage.
Like both of your last marriages.
Whoa.
This has been a thing with us.
I didn't hear that. Please try that again.
We're not saying anything at all like that.
The Echo.
The Echo's name, and she'll randomly just start talking. I think you're haunted.
Hey,
I like that.
Well, when I first bought the house, you and I both heard it. There was a ghost in this house.
It was knocking and everything.
Yeah, I was leaving it like, hey, you can hang around, just don't scare the kids.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Speaking of hauntings, I'm a little upset.
About?
Apparently there are some naysayers and some fucking retards. I'll go there.
Well.
And I never fucking say that. That are saying that the haunted Heyman house is not haunted.
What? Have they actually been there?
They're trying to say that it's like faked or whatever. And it's like, no, you and I have been there.
Yeah, it's not fake at all.
It is.
Well, Kim Kardashian's ass.
But she's not, but her
That's
ass,
fake.
even though her ass is as big as the Heyman house.
Yes.
It's not the Heyman house. But the haunted Heyman, I mean, it's fucking haunted. I mean, I don't know what, I don't get that. I think it's just jealous people. But anyway, because I could
They're
go.
probably Christians.
Probably. But it pisses me off because, you know, we know the owner and she's wonderful and she loves that house. I mean, she's
a sweetheart.
Yeah, and I just don't get, I think it's just jealousy. It has to be jealousy. So if you're listening, don't drink the haterade. Let the haters go.
Here's my word of the day. It's my opportunity to use it.
Oh.
We don't want to hear that blatherskite.
Yes. I didn't even know that was the word of the day. And I set you up for it.
Yes, you did.
Wasn't that great? Okay, anyway, I'm going to try not to... We need to really try not to stray as much. I mean, I'm saying that after we've spent, first, almost 4 minutes of the podcast completely off topic. I have a lot of information to go through on Gerald Gardner. Okay? The problem that you and I have with Gerald Gardner is that he created this myth around how he got the information that he used to create Wicca. If he had been open and honest, and because you and I, we're very open and honest about where we get our information.
Yeah.
And even if people don't like that we have access to their Book of Shadows and we're using information from their Book of Shadows, we're not lying and saying that we created it all ourselves. No, knowledge learned is knowledge earned.
As far as, not energy wise, but as far as the Wiccan religion, which we personally don't follow.
No.
I learned all of my Wiccan stuff from Asen and the Crystal Owls. And I even kept all of my huge notebooks full of stuff he gave me.
Yeah.
Because what if somebody comes along and wants to learn about it? I can be like, here you go.
Yeah. And you can't really look at any, basically the basic structure of most Wiccan beliefs, like, because they kind of like, you do your own thing, and that's the great thing about Wicca, is that you kind of personalize it to yourself, but the basic structure of it, it all come from Gardner. Okay, like, well, he stole it from other people, but like, he's the one who said, like, this is what we're going to do. But anyway, so he is known to be the father of modern day Wicca. He is an important name in Wicca's history. I mean, there's no way that you could remove him from it. And so we're not bashing him in that sense, okay? A lot of Wiccans like to say that their religion is old. And
Wicca is nothing like it was.
Yeah, well, but that's the thing. Wicca didn't exist until the 1900s.
Yeah.
Like, like around 1940 is when he really started. Like, he started back in 1900, but like around 1940 is when Wicca, as we know it today, kind of started shaping. You'll even hear people say things like that Christianity plagiarized Wicca. And that's not the case. I mean, that's really not the case. Christianity stole, like, Celtic beliefs and things, but like, Wicca is not a Celtic belief. You rate the offspring is in the room. I'm trying my best to like just keep right on going. And she's raising her hand. Like, what?
I thought, like, before you said like Celtic and Wiccan is not the same thing. Like, wait.
Okay.
Wouldn't it be like the same thing?
Well, let me read and and I'll get to it.
Okay.
Promise.
I don't know what she's reading either.
Because your mom doesn't help me.
She won't let me.
Bullshit.
Whenever I do a podcast, you lose your mind.
Because you don't do anything.
Well, I just sit there and like drink pop
anyway.
and tajitos.
So when you think about, like, a lot of people say, Christianity, like their practices, like Christmas is a good example, was stolen from Wicca. It wasn't stolen from Wicca, okay? Wicca was a creation of Gerald Gardner, who actually put it together using rip-offs from Aleister Crowley, Freemasonry, Egyptian ideologies, and Celtic lore.
Can we do one on Aleister?
Oh, on Aleister, like, we would do a series on him. Like, he's in here.
I think it'd be fun.
He's in here. We touch on him in here.
He was just crazy enough.
He was.
I think it'd be fun.
I liked it. But anyway, like, so he stole information from all of these people that he had met.
Gerald
throughout his life, and Aleister Crowley was one of them. There's some others, and I'll get to them. But you can't say that Christianity stole from Wicca when Wicca was created from the religions that came before it. Okay, like that's
just paganism.
Yeah, paganism. There's so many lies as well behind Gerald Gardner, and we're going to touch on a lot of those throughout this. One of them is that he claimed to be a master mason, which is like a 3rd degree mason. Their records show that he was only an entered apprentice mason, which is the 1st degree. So that would have had him like at the lowest level of being a mason. He would have only seen the most basic and like introductory expressions of their rituals. And actually, like, that's a lot of what you're seeing in Wicca is their basic beginning rituals. He also claimed,
whoa
masonry.
You're kidding.
Yeah, the Freemasons.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he stole it from the Freemasons.
I have a question. What's Masons?
Well, you can ask us all these questions when we're done. If you like, look at all these pages, honey.
Okay.
It's going to take me forever to get through this if I stop and explain everything along the way.
Okay.
It's something women can't join. How's
Yeah,
that?
they're assholes. Well, I don't want to say they're assholes, but they won't let women join.
Like sexist?
No, it's just like a guys only thing.
Yeah.
Oh.
Your dad's one.
Assholes. Sorry. He also claimed to be a member of the Scottish Rite, but in order to, and that's another part of like a Freemason. It's like another level, but you have to be a Master Mason to be initiated into the Scottish Rites. So
I've never even heard of it.
Well, but because they're so secretive. Like when you join the Freemasons, you know the levels and everything, but you won't know, like when you're initiated as a 1st degree. you'll know that there's a second degree, but you won't know the secrets of second degree till you're there, you know. So he knew about the Scottish rites within Freemasonry, but he would never have been able to participate in that because you have to be a master mason to be initiated into that. So that was just another lie, you know. And there's all kinds of lies. He also claimed to have received his doctorate in philosophy and a doctorate in literature. And both of those are not accurate as well. Like, that was just another lie that he told. He claimed that he was initiated into the New Forest Coven in 1939 by Dorothy Clutterbuck.
That sounds like a Harry Potter name.
Yeah. The New Forest Coven was allegedly an ancient religion handed down throughout the generations in secret because of fear of persecution. However, despite attempts by Doreen Valiente, there's no valid proof that Dorothy Clutterbuck even existed, much less initiated Gardner into any coven. Now, she was trying to legitimize what he had created. Mm-hmm. So for her to be like, I'm not really sure Dorothy's a real person. Yeah. That should tell you a lot. Now, she did kind of hedge a little bit, and she was like, well, maybe that was just a name that she used. It wasn't her true name. So she never actually went and said that, like, Dorothy didn't exist, period, just that she couldn't find proof that she existed under the name Dorothy.
It could have been her witch name.
It could have been her witch name. So, I mean, I don't know. Now, if you think about, if he lied about Dorothy Clutterbuck, there's another story that involves her that's not Gardner per se, but like during World War II. Dorothy is supposed to be the witch that gathered that made that, like, the Wolverine Coven or whatever it's called.
With the cone of power.
Yeah, and did magic to keep, Hitler from coming onto the shores of Britain. So if she didn't exist, then that story's a lie too. And that's a story that a lot of Wiccans talk about, like that this big piece of magic. But anyway, many pagans today have blindly accepted his story of how he supposedly made contact with her coven, and how he was initiated. And another thing I think is kind of funny is, like, he actually referred to Wicca as a cult himself.
Really?
Like, in his letters and stuff, he would say, like, cult, the Wicca cult. So you think about, like, he said Dorothy Clutterbuck was the one that initiated him. And then there was young Daffo, who ended up becoming his high priestess. But that's not the whole of it. No, because I mean, obviously I wasn't there. Yeah. Obviously.
That's not a name I even recognize.
Yeah. But there's letters and accounts that have been researched and put together to form like a timeline almost of his life. And if you read between those letters and things that have been gathered, like, you can kind of tell the truth about what Wicca really is and how it really came to be. Now, one of the websites that I pulled a lot of this information from, I mean, the majority of this was actually his website. Whether it's, I think it's like GeraldGardner.com or maybe just Gardner.com. But it's a website that has been put together in honor of him and to trace his history. Uh-huh. So if you're thinking like a lot of this information is incorrect, I pulled it directly from his fucking page. Okay. Like his history, like it goes along with his museum and everything. And then another website, I forget like the full title of it, was Angel Fire or something. And so that was the two websites that I pulled this information from. So there's one popular theory on why and how he created Wicca. It makes sense, but like when I get to the end of it, I'm kind of like, it's a lot of work for pussy. I'll just say that. Okay. Yeah. One popular theory is that in 1939, while fire watching in the early days of the war, Gardner met Edith Grimes, or Daffo, as she was later to be known, which was the high priestess we talked about a second ago.
Yes.
It transpired that they were both members of the New Forest Nudist Club. Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to note here that there's documentation that he was actually kicked out of that nudist club for non-compliance to standards and practices. So, again, that's one of those things like you read between the lines.
Something wasn't right.
Because, you and I have said for a long time that, like, he was a pervert.
Yeah.
Like, just a big old pervert.
Yep.
He was kicked out of a nudist club. What are you fucking doing?
Have you noticed how little I can talk when I'm not cussing?
I know.
Was probably checking out all the women
Probably.
and being a pervert.
So you got to think like, what are you doing to get kicked out of a nudist club? Okay, anyway. But anyway, he met Edith Grimes at the nudist club. They fell rather seriously in love. This was awkward since both of them were married.
Oh.
Edith to a parson from whom she was estranged, and Gardner to a wife that he'd been with for several years.
A parson.
Yes, like a religious.
That's what I thought.
Yes.
Okay.
She was married. She was estranged from him, hanging out at the nudist club, where she met Gardner.
Guess we know why they're estranged.
Yes. Somewhere along the line, they got it into their heads that they had been lovers in a past life.
Sure.
This was the beginning of their conviction that their status of lovers had a higher legitimacy than the mere law of marriage. Okay.
Sure.
It was something magical, something sacred. Edith regarded Gerald as the man who had been her partner and the father of her children in an earlier existence. Edith also believed herself to be a witch by reincarnation. And Gardner supported her in this belief. He was like, oh, honey, sure. I'll buy into whatever you want me to buy into if it means I can be with you.
Yeah.
Basically. So, she was naturally interested in things occult. I mean, for you to think like I'm a reincarnated witch, like you're naturally into things that revolve around the occult. It was the notion of witchcraft that Edith and Gerald would turn in their urgent need to find a sacred context within which they could be lovers. So
why couldn't they just get together?
See, and I that's what I'm saying. Like this story, this theory of why and how he created, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Okay. I mean, like the only thing I could think of is that she was that crazy. And he wanted her that bad that he went along with it. That's the only thing I can think.
He wanted to be with somebody that let him run around in a nudist colony.
Yeah. If they, so if they could be witches again, they could be free to be together without guilt.
What?
Yeah, I know, and that's what's so fucked up about it. And like this is just a theory. There's no this part right here. There's no.
It's blatherskite.
Yes, there's no like grounding of facts, but she is connected through his life, and they'll talk about that in a second.
Sure.
He had been initiated into the Ordo Templi Orientis, I don't know, the OTO. And I'm pretty sure that was like part of the Freemasons. Okay.
Sure.
Don't hold me to that. It may not be. There's probably people out there who are in this particular tradition and they know more than I do about it.
Yeah.
But he had been initiated into the OTO. And he had been thrilled with the work of Aleister Crowley and its inspirational promise of a new sexuality, a sacred sexuality. He gravitated toward Crowley's systems of ceremonial phallic worship.
That.
And
I'll tell you later.
And adorned and the adoration of the reproductive force. He and Edith decided to create a cult in which would exist a tradition of sacred ceremonial sex, which would take no account for the marital status of the participators, in that ceremony. And obviously, that cult would have to be hedged in secrecy, because if you're going to be married, then you and anyone else participating in that would need to keep it secret so that your other spouse doesn't find out. Yeah.
You know what I want to say.
Well, say it.
It was just like a sex club.
Yeah,
Okay.
basically. It was like a swingers club.
Sex cult.
so they were like, okay, it's time to begin the witch cult, and have a sexual rite at its core. Yeah. It's not known what went on between Gerald and Edith in the house of Dorothy Clutterbuck, if she was in fact real.
Every time I hear that last name, I just
Clutterbuck.
laugh. Yeah.
It may be that she was a friend of one or the other of them. What is certainly true is that what they had in mind could not be done at Gardner's house nor at Edith's house, because they were both married.
And there were phalluses everywhere.
Yeah. Edith, believing herself to have been a witch in a past life, made Gerald a witch. He was welcomed with a kiss. She and Gardner could then conduct the formal rites of initiation later. So, you know what that means. Yeah.
I'm not going to go in depth because I know you got a lot to say, but this whole being made a witch by somebody else is really stupid.
Yeah, it is.
It makes no sense.
So it was that Wicca was born as a sacred context within which two people who desired one another could consummate that love. Okay? By making it sacred, it was redeemed from being mere adultery.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a piece of me that wants to say, that makes sense.
It's not cheating, it's my religion.
That, that he would feed her this line of information to get her to have sex with him. Or that he would buy into what she was saying so that he would get to have sex with her. That makes sense.
He really wanted it.
Yeah. But by making it sacred, it was redeemed from being mere adultery. By assuming the role of once persecuted witches, the importance of security and secrecy was made manifest. The metaphysics of the cult drew directly from esoteric ideology, a bountiful goddess who demanded nothing in sacrifice, and a potent male principle. Edith, formerly a witch only by reincarnation, acquired formal status as a priestess. His writings, later, because there was letters back and forth between them that had been discovered, and that's why I know that that Edith existed. All of the things that I read up to this point was just drawing from those letters and creating this story that makes sense based on the letters that they found. But in one of the letters, he did say to her, "We worship the divine spirit of creation, which is the life spring of the world, and without which life itself would perish. To us it is the most sacred and holy mystery, proof that God is within us, whose command is, go forth and multiply. Such rites are done in a holy and reverent way." So he said that in a letter to her. Basically,
Hold up.
Yep.
He's referencing Christianity to justify his Wiccan
need to have
perversity.
Where is there not Christianity in anything?
This is true. That was in a letter when you could tell that he was trying to convince her that it was okay, that there's this other spiritual reason why it's okay for us to do this. And basically what he was saying is that, what you and I are doing and what we're doing within our cult is not just mere orgies.
Sure.
And then he also said to her in the same letter, "Witches have for hundreds of years held their meetings in private. They are people who want release from this world into a world of fantasy. To a certain kind of person, the relief gained has been enormous benefit, and these occasional nights of release are something to live for."
Sure.
So he was, again, it's just him trying to justify, and this is probably why he got kicked out of the nudist club, because he was recruiting people from the nudist club.
He was probably telling other females this same stuff. Yeah.
So I'm sure that these releases.
He's like, the Bible says.
Yeah. The nights that he met with his little group from the nudist club, I bet it truly was a release.
Oh.
Ching.
I didn't hear that one.
They had come halfway to Eden by being nudist. Sexual freedom was the next step, but it could not be mere debauchery.
What
it
do you
had
mean
to be
halfway
sacred.
to Eden?
Because like in the Garden of Eden, no one wore clothes. Like Adam and Eve did not wear clothing, and they were bare to each other, and no secrets, and like all of that shit that's in the Bible. So he was saying that like by being in the nudist club, you're getting back to that like basic honesty and seeing each other for who you are. And, by having sex, you're taking it to that next step of heaven. What? Are you texting each other? What?
She just summed up everything.
What'd she say?
She goes, so Wicca is basically just a thing that's been made up by two people who were cheating on their spouses and they didn't want to feel guilty about what they were doing.
Yes. I mean, there's a little more to it than that.
That's like me trying
yeah.
to explain stuff.
Yeah.
She's so mine.
And I don't really, and like when I get to the end of this, I'll put my opinion on this part of the information that I have. Okay. He also wrote in the letter, there are some unattached people, or some whose respective spouses are for some reason or another not members of the cult. I have heard fierce purists declare that no married man or woman should belong to or attend any club or society to which their respective partners did not also belong. But such strict views are not part of witchcraft. So he was trying to say, like, it's because he was saying there's unattached people, there was people that married but their partners didn't know.
Yeah.
So that whole letter to her was him like justifying what they were doing. So it wasn't setting right with her, and he was talking her into it. Okay. In order to give the impression that their new Wicca cult was an ancient thing, Gardner began to fabricate myths of its origin, which were set down later in his book Witchcraft Today. He left enormous credibility gaps, requiring the informed reader to both believe that the initiation, at least to the 3rd degree, took place sexually, but also that this practice was handed down through families. So think about that for a second. So it's saying anyone who reaches 3rd degree had to have sex in order, like ritualistic sex, in order to get the 3rd degree. But he was also saying that it was something that had been passed down through families for generations.
What?
Yeah. Let that sink in for a second.
I'd rather not.
So, so if that's true, it means that there was like some sacred Wiccan incest going on
Oh my god.
for centuries. Like if you believe that.
That's awful.
And in his myth that he kind of wove around how he got this information and how he decided to share it with all of us, there are so many inconsistencies like that. So yeah, I don't know. Of course, you know that your old Alistair,
Yeah.
you know he was supposed to have had sex with his grandmother to be initiated.
Ah!
Did you know that?
No.
Okay. We'll have to do a podcast on him.
I want to have sex with my grandfather or something.
Ew.
That's gross.
It is.
Anyway. Now, Edith and him did eventually drift apart. And who knows what the circumstances, behind that exactly, like exactly what happened. But they did remain close for a time. She once wrote to him, once he started going public with Wicca, to rebuke him for what he was saying and doing. One theory has it that this was because Edith was a hereditary witch and disapproved of him sharing the information. But to me, like, what's more credible is that, like, she didn't want information about her affair.
Well, that doesn't make sense because she said she was a witch in a past life, and now all of a sudden she's a hereditary.
That's what
witch.
I'm saying. There's so many inconsistencies in what he reported. In his in Witchcraft Today, he left out huge gaps, and he tried to pretend like he never really knew Aleister Crowley all that well at all. But there's all of this documentation and letters that prove that he fucking did.
Yeah.
So that's my problem with him. I mean, besides just being skeevy, and the whole like I'm going to create ways that I can have sex with people. and call it a religion.
Yeah.
You know, that bothers me about him. That he's just so, he's just skeevy. There's no other way to fucking say it. He's just skeevy. But, you know, I think that she was asking him to shut up because she didn't want, you know, word of her affair and everything that she had been. Because there's having an affair and there's I'm part of a sex cult affair. Like, you wouldn't want your husband to find out either. But, like, for him to find out that you, like, orgies. And he was like, a religious, like, pastor or whatever.
Oh.
You know, so I could understand her not wanting her husband to find out. She was questioned later in life. And then she was just, like, she just denied ever knowing him being involved in the craft. She's like, I got nothing. They're like, well, about this letter. She's like, I don't know what to tell you.
She acted like my husband when he knows he's known about something and then I bring it up. And
Yeah.
What?
Like, you gotta be kidding.
And the same stupid look on her face.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, like, I don't, you know, because when he met Edith and when all of this was supposed to have happened, he had already been meeting people and, you know, so, like, I don't think that he created Wicca specifically for her and, like, to be able to have sex with her. I think it was already something that he was, like, doing anyway. And she's just one of the only ones that we have proof. Because, I mean, if you buy into that theory, he was one persistent son of a bitch.
Yeah.
You know, because he would have created a whole religion to be able to have sex with a married woman.
Wow.
Because, I mean, it wasn't just like he was just, like, you know, playing into her and, like, you know,
it sounds to me like he was pretty hedonistic and wanted to be surrounded by people that were the same.
Yeah. I think what's more believable is that, you know, he just wanted to gain power and notoriety.
Sounds like he just wants to have sex.
And he had a healthy dose of sexual dysfunction. You know, I think that that's what it kind of boils down to. Because, you know, we're talking years of meeting with people and placing himself in the right place at the right time to gather information from religious and secret orders that have had centuries of history, you know, under their belt. I think that's, you know, a little much for him to just be able to sleep with one woman.
I think your podcast is going to ruffle some feathers.
Well, and that's kind of what we do. But, again, I'm not saying that Gerald Gardner did not create Wicca. He fucking did. I'm not saying he didn't. What I'm saying is that he fucking lied about how and why it came about. Okay? And we're going to start talking now about some of the people that he has, that he met, and, you know, had in his inner circle, and it all fucking connects. Okay?
Okay.
We're going to start with first Father John Sebastian Marlowe Ward.
That sounds scary.
Okay. He was a leader of a lay order called the, Confraternity of Christ the King. It was a cadre of shoeless monks who made everything they needed, from food to clothing. He ran a historical park called the Abbey Folk Park in New Barnet. He was a Freemason, and he was Gardner's friend. Ward, like Gardner, began his professional life as a customs officer in the Far East. And he also studied Chinese secret societies. At some point, Ward began to have visions that led him to expect the imminent approach of the second coming of Christ. I mean, he was wrong. I mean, we'll just say that. Like, he was wrong.
He was smoking the bad strain.
Yeah. If he was over in, like, he was, you know, studying Chinese societies.
He was hitting that opium, man.
Yeah, that's probably what it was. So he formed his order in preparation of the Messiah's arrival, and he made the center of his operations just north of London. The usual story describing Ward's activities in the 40s is that Ward assumed authority and led the Anglican vicar of the... Wait a minute, that came out wrong. I said the word right. It's just, the sentence is not coming out right. The usual story describing his activities in the late 40s is that his assumed authority, like where he was like, no, Christ is coming, it led to the Anglican vicar of the area to eventually excommunicate him.
Vicer? Like, I don't even know what that would be.
Vicar, vicar.
Vicar?
Maybe, I don't know.
It's vicar.
Let Mom see it.
Anyway.
It's vicar.
Anyway. He was excommunicated for thinking that he knew Christ was coming. And didn't ask the vicar.
I thought that's what they were teaching anyway.
The vicar.
I don't understand how he
Well,
got
but he I don't guess he was high enough. Like if God was going to tell anybody, he would tell the Pope.
You're like, the vicar.
The vicar.
The vice president.
Ward, in response, became... So he was excommunicated. He's like, you know what? That's okay. He became ordained as a priest and bishop of an old Catholic sect based in the East. So he's like, whatever.
Sure.
He was eventually ran out of the country. Accounts say that it was due to his insistence that he knew Jesus was coming back. But documents from that time say his flight from the country probably had more to do with a legal conflict surrounding inappropriate behavior with an adolescent girl who he had taken custody of, rather than any conflict with the Church of England. So that the documentation. So there's another. So one he knows Gerald, and we know that Gerald has some freaky shit going on because he's part of the nudist club and created a sex club and all that. So here's this man that he knows that is kind of fucking crazy, and it's like, you know what? I'm just going to do my own thing within the Catholic religion. You know, got excommunicated for it. It was like, doesn't matter.
It was a girl.
Yeah.
You're supposed to stick with boys.
And yeah. Oh.
Nice.
So he ended up being run out of England because of what he did to this child. But whatever the cause for his flight from England, Gardner graciously offered to give Ward the property he had purchased in Cyprus. So he's like, "Oh, my buddy who molested a girl, here, you can go stay at my property in Cyprus." Okay.
That's messed up.
So there's the first person, and of course, like he comes back later. Like when he went to Cyprus and he started up his little Jesus is coming cult in Cyprus. He had a lot of very witchy type things happening with his cult there in Cyprus, and some of that's actually pulled into what Gardner does later. So now we have the next person was W.B. Crowe, and he was an occultist, and he nurtured an interest in many different facets of religions, especially Eastern spirituality. In 1939, Crowe founded the Order of Holy Wisdom, which generally expressed the notion that there is hidden knowledge latent in the religious teachings of all nations and times. Crowe's entrance into the old Catholic movement, which is what the guy we just talked about, the rapey priest.
Yeah.
That's what he was doing in Cyprus, was the old Catholic movement. Okay. He was just like, this is how we're supposed to be Catholics. Jesus is coming and all this stuff. So,
Crap.
so he entered into the old Catholic movement around 1943 when he was consecrated by James Hurd into, that group. Hurd had derived orders from Lucius Marino.
Oh, I was hoping you were going to say Lucius Malfoy.
No, Marino. Who led a small church represented mainly in the East. With this consecration, Crowe gave himself the title Mar Balius Abdullah III.
Abdullah.
And he began using his status to promote his esoteric brand of liberal Catholicism. God, that come out bad.
Liberal
Yes.
Catholicism.
Yes. At about the same time, in April of 1944, Crow consecrated Newman and also initiated a correspondence with Aleister Crowley that would eventually result in his involvement with the OTC. So here we're having connections, okay? So we have the rapey priest that Gardner was friends with, okay? Mm-hmm. And then we have this Crow guy who joined rapey priest's cult. Mm-hmm. And he was then introduced to someone who corresponds with Aleister Crowley. Mm-hmm. So they're all connecting, okay? So,
it's just getting creepier.
It is. So you have Ward that we talked about a second ago. And he's really like the visual, like the person that kind of like brought everything together and like really started connecting things. He was actively aware, with the rapey priest and then with the Crow guy. The three men linked closely by consecrations and common interests. When Gardner was granted his charter at the start of an OTO encampment, he wrote what seems to have been an unsolicited letter to Crow. So this was Gardner sending a letter to Crow, okay, which was the guy that joined Rapey Priest's group, okay. It's complicated. I've tried so hard to make it make sense, but they're all connected, and you got to think like, so here we have Rapey Priest who has all of these like Catholic rites and stuff because he was a fucking priest. And then you have this Crow guy who comes in who studied all of these like religious sects and things like that in China, like Chinese like religious stuff. And then you have this Ward guy who knew all of them and could mention to Gardner like, hey, there's this guy Crow who blah blah blah. So Gardner sent a letter to Crow to inform him of his new camp. And now they called camp like anytime they started like a cult. It was their camp instead of cult. This possible group of acquaintances does not emerge in Gardner's own biography or in any of the other writings that he left behind, just as Gardner's association with the OTO goes unmentioned despite there being tons of evidence. So Gardner very purposely left out his connection to these people.
You think?
Because he stole their information. It's like he was hiding the fact that he knew these men, and that's where the majority of his knowledge came from. It is known that Gardner received a consecration from Ward into the Orthodox Catholic Church in England. Like that has been documented. Okay, he had I can't say that word a lot.
Consecration.
I don't know why I have such a hard time with that one.
You throw an extra N in it.
I do. We've talked about my tongue.
I don't.
That sounded bad.
But anyway, so there's documentation that he did become a part of the Orthodox Catholic Church. So there's another connection to hit that to the old Catholic stuff that Rapey Priest was doing. The naturist group, which was the nudist group that
the nudist
goop. Ew.
Yeah, nasty.
The nudist group that Gardner attended in the 40s was called the 5 Acres Country Club. It was founded around like 1929, and his niece, Gardner's niece, Miriam Gardner, remembers that in the winter of 1946, she was 16 years old, and she was visiting her uncle for a few weeks before attending a boarding school in London. During that stay, a few images stood out more than others. One,
you think?
One was her only trip to the nudist club, where she saw a naked man sitting on a radiator because it was so cold.
He could have put some clothes on.
I can't imagine setting your balls on a radiator.
I've had radiators.
Or your butt cheeks on a radiator. I can't imagine it.
The ones I had never got that hot.
But she recalls trying to look at the ceiling and feeling uncomfortable during her stay at the
I'd
nudist.
say.
Here's like they're letting he brought his 16-year-old niece around a bunch of naked people.
He should have had a CPS case.
I know. So and that's just another example of like how like skeevy he is. But the reason because he and again, like I talked earlier about how Gardner kind of put himself at the right places at the right time and would get to know the right people, and he would initiate conversations if he heard someone else talk about someone who was into something that was very esoteric. He would like send letters to them. You know, he was very methodical in getting to know who he needed to know so he could get the information. He actually bought a few acres of land near the 5 Acres Country Club so that he could be closer to the club. Okay.
Is that the nudie club?
Yes. On this piece of densely wooded property, he transplanted an old cottage from the Abbey Folk Park. Now, if you remember, the Abbey Folk Park was the thing that the rapey priest was running. Mm-hmm. And it gathered all of this, like, it was a museum more than anything, like where he was gathering, like, religious artifacts, but not just from, like, Christianity. It was from everything.
Okay.
So, rapey priest had to shut down what he was doing. I don't know at that point what was happening to rapey priest.
He was probably being a rapey priest.
Yes, but he had to shut it down. So he gave everything he had to Gardner, including the cottage that he housed his museum. So they actually moved the whole fucking building from where rapey priest had it to Gardner's new land, which was near the club that housed the nudist group. Okay. It was a small half-timber house that had been designed to resemble a 16th century witch's cottage, complete with a Kabbalah, like it's Kabbalah, but istic on the end.
Okay.
Like insignias decorating the inner walls. So here he's like, I'm going to buy this land near the nudist club. I'm going to put my museum of like ancient shit.
I can't.
Oh!
I'm starting over.
You fail.
I'm starting over.
You fail.
Wait, Mom, where is this?
So he moved that closer. You know. So he's setting himself up. Nothing that he ever did leading up through this was by chance. Okay. So he gets his little witch's hut with his little museum in it, and he puts it near the nudist club. Then he talked one of his, like, remember we talked about Edith before?
Yeah.
How she said she didn't know him?
Yeah.
Well, in 1947, Edith and Gardner started a company together called Ancient Crafts Ltd. She didn't know him, but bitch started a company with him.
Did they make it a limited liability corporation?
Yeah, Ancient Crafts. And this was in order to raise money to purchase the nudist club. It was the clubhouse was going to go up for sale. And everything that, you know, happened in there was up for grabs.
Did the naked people come with it?
Yes, because the club, you know, if you already had clubs going there, you would get to keep your club happening. He said that he wanted to start a museum there at the club and offer classes on old religions. So he wants to start, you know, open a museum, which he already has all the stuff from Rapey Priest.
You just had to be naked during class.
And then he wanted to start offering classes on old religions. They ended up not being successful, and they was only able to buy a percentage of the country club. Okay, the nudist club. A few years later, Gardner had to implore a friend of his, Cecil Williamson. This is the next person of note, Cecil Williamson, to purchase the percentage of the club not owned by Gardner and his friends, which was Edith. Gardner's motive seemed to have been to provide a larger social circle from which he could draft people into a tighter inner group, a coven. His museum and the attendant study group was supposed to form a kind of impromptu outer court. So basically what Gardner's goal was, like, if I can buy the nudist group, I can then recruit from the nudist group people that I'm going to put into my sex orgy cult.
Yeah.
Okay, so that, like I said, nothing he did was just by happenstance. So this is the letter that he wrote to his friend Cecil to try to get Cecil to buy what was left. The position is that the blighter who was giving me so much trouble is trying to wreck the club and get it all in his own hands. But I and a friend of mine, which is Edith, hold half the shares, and she says okay. That means that whatever the price, only half needs to be paid. If you run motor, so he's saying okay, we own half of it, and if you can find someone else to own the other half, Edith's on board for what I want to do. And then, so here's him trying to convince him that this would be a good business opportunity. He said, if you run motor coaches from London through the beautiful country, through Bricket Wood to Witch Hut and the museum, they can have lunch there, and then go on to St. Cathedral Museum, and then, go back to London another way. Like he was saying, people can make it like a trip, and we would be a stop on the trip.
Stop for lunch. Take your clothes off.
Yeah.
Run around.
So he was like, that would be the legitimate face of what we're doing and how you could make money of this. And he goes, then the nudist club could use it on Saturdays and Sundays. I think the study group should be encouraged to join the folklore society. So he's saying okay, we're going to have study groups and we're going to encourage them to join this society, which I'm going to call the folklore society. And he made a point to say we would have cheaper rates for students. So he's trying to get young people to come join this by saying we're going to give them...
They should change the word folk in folklore to the other F word.
Yes. And then he says, students should be told to join the nudist club at the museum, and we'll give them special rates as well to join the nudist club. Then on Saturdays and Sundays, you can go down to the museum. We can have stuff out and study it and try it. And the old witch dances, etc. The ones who take to it will be initiated, and no one can say anything because they are all members of a nudist club.
He just flat out said it.
Yeah, he was basically saying we're going to get all these young students. We're going to reel them in by telling them it's folk history and all this stuff. We're going to give them special rates so they can afford it, and then we're going to get them to join the nudist club. And then once they join the nudist club, we're going to bring them into and start doing the witch stuff, which was sex, basically. Mm-hmm. And he was like, though no one will say anything because they joined a nudist club. Mm-hmm. And they won't want anyone to know. Mm-hmm. So, he's just fucking dirty. And then he said, if it could be managed, we could, I think, get a good, strong cult going. That was his exact words in that letter to Cecil. Mm-hmm. We could get a good, strong cult going. We could probably have a meeting place in London. The Folklore Society can always borrow committee room from the London University. And I think the Folklore Study Group could also get it if the secret was kept. But it must be kept. So, so that letter was written in April of 1951, okay, to his friend Cecil Williamson. Williamson ended up purchasing property on the Isle of Man instead and opened his own museum and, didn't have any, he's like, no. Okay. But Gardner continued to insist on having a role in managing the museum until Williamson finally I'm going to sell it to you. He still didn't get in bed with him. He's like, listen, just fucking stop. Mm-hmm. Here it is. Okay. So see how these things are kind of laying in together in the people that he knew, and
he's shady.
Yeah. So
he reminds me of my first husband.
Yes. No. So then we bring in Arnold Crowther. Okay, Arnold Crowther. He was what Gardner described as a conjurer and a showman, who had also been made a witch doctor in Africa. So here's another person who was a conjurer and a showman and supposedly had been made a witch doctor in Africa. Crowther was a stage magician and puppet.
I thought you were going to say stage midget.
I almost said musician instead of magician. He was a stage magician and a puppeteer who had entertained England's gentry since the late 30s when he was hired to amuse members of the royal family. Okay. Religiously, Crowther had been interested in Buddhism, African folk practices, and Freemasonry. So here we are, because you know there's some Buddhist practices in Wicca. Okay. So Crowther had met Gardner in 1939 at a lecture on folklore given by Christina Hole, who was a... that's her last name. I can't help it.
Hole.
Hole. I didn't like, that wasn't like me messing up. Hole is hole is hole.
Holy.
But anyway, Crowther met Gardner at her, lecture. And she was a member of the Folklore Society, okay, which was something that he was starting to reel in the people he could have sex with. In 1947, Crowther was 38 and settling down after traveling with the Entertainers National Services Association throughout Europe during the war. So he was part of this troupe of entertainers who went and entertained during the war. Crowther's relationship with Gardner was a light friendship. The two men rarely saw each other, mostly due to the frequency that they both traveled. But Crowther himself remarked that Gardner's easy and talkative manner made it as if they had never parted. Some say this was another source that Gardner used to form his new religion. So even Crowther was like, he's really easy to talk to, and he just told him stuff. Okay. Sometime during the war, when Crowther was in England, he was mistaken at a party for Aleister Crowley. Because their names are similar.
Yeah.
Okay. And someone said that that Aleister Crowley was a magician. So he's like, oh, okay, another magician. I want to meet another magician.
He's like, sure.
Yeah. So intrigued by the coincidence, Crowther began to inquire after who Crowley was and eventually met him. So we're setting the stage. Like, all these people are interconnecting. Here's someone that, Gardner met Arnold Crowther, who was interested in, very
a stage midget.
Well, no. very, very, esoteric stuff.
Are you okay, Bev?
So then Crowther gets set up to go and meet Crowley. Okay, so it's all connecting. Aleister Crowley is another huge name in the history of witchcraft. I won't go into a lot of detail about him individually. I'm just going to focus on the information he eventually came to hold and, the stuff that's related to Gardner. When he was younger, Crowley discovered a number of things that would prove to be motivating forces in his life. These were sex, magic, and the insatiable desire for knowledge and renown. As a young man, Crowley attended Cambridge briefly, but left before taking a degree to follow his interest in the occult. Okay. So, George Cecil Jones introduced Crowley, which was the one, like Aleister Crowley. The names get so, similar here in a little bit, I have a hard time keeping it together. George Cecil Jones introduced Crowley to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn during the order's most formative periods in the 1980s. Crowley excelled at the lower degrees, and by 1904, he had broken with the Order of the Golden Dawn on fighting terms and was in the process of starting a very similar order called and now it was, okay, so it was A, and then like a triangle of 3 dots, and then A and another triangle with 3 dots. So it's kind of like Prince for a while there had the symbol. So there's a symbol there, but I'm just going to refer to it as the AA. He operated with that group throughout the rest of his life. In 1910, Crowley met with a German journalist named Theodor Russ, who was also part of a leadership of an irregular German Freemason order. and called the Ordo Templi Orientis. That's the OTO we talked about earlier. The OTO combined a number of different Freemason rites with various other German orders based on the traditions of the Templars and the Illuminists, as in
Illuminists.
as in Illuminati. Okay.
Sure.
To this matrix of continental European ritual, the OTO's creator, Karl Kellner, also added a strain of, Jesus, I don't even know.
Hepatitis?
No, not hepatitis. Bengali
AIDS.
tantrism. Is it like maybe?
Tantric is a sexual thing.
So I knew what that was. It was the Bengali that got me.
That sounds like an STD.
It does. It's how you get one anyway. So he initiated Crowley and supervised his secession into the first degree of the order. So this is like a little bit of history on Crowley and like where Crowley got all of his information, because that motherfucker had a lot of information.
He did.
He was initiated into all these different things. So right now we have like he was part of the Order of the Golden Dawn. He started his own like Golden Dawn-esque group, the AA. And then he was like, oh, here's this like German, chapter or whatever. I want to learn some German, fucking rights and shit. And then he's like, oh, here's some tantric sex stuff. Let's learn that. So, he had a lot of information. So I wanted to kind of like just lay out, why it would have been important for Gardner to be able to get to know and fall in with Crowley. Crowley declared himself effective leader of the order and succeeded like the previous ruler in his death in 1923. I'm going to skip a lot of this because I don't want to go on forever and ever and ever. We could do a whole podcast since we're going to do one on Crowley.
Yeah.
I don't want to like go and repeat a bunch of stuff. So basically you get down to where now Aleister Crowley is heading this very Freemason-like group with all of these secrets and secret rituals and information that he has cobbled together from a lot of different sources and histories. By 1947, Crowley was living out a quiet retirement, entertaining various occasional guests, and keeping his contacts throughout the world by means of frequent letters. On Thursday, May the 1st of 1947, Arnold Crowther. Now remember, Arnold Crowther was the
stage midget.
The stage midget. Not really, but that's how we're going to remember him. Who knew Gardner, and he was like, "Oh, someone mistakenly thought I was Aleister Crowley." Mm-hmm. So by this point, those two have met and they've become friends. So Arnold Crowther brought Gerald Gardner to have tea with Aleister Crowley at Crowley's home in Hastings. So there we have a connection of Gardner now meeting Aleister. Gardner introduced himself. Now see this. So here's where he's telling his lies in order to get what he wants. So he's meeting the head of this whole fucking like organization that spans like his organization at that point was in America. It was in over in England, and it was in Germany. So this is a 3-country religious sect. So Gardner can't go in there and just be like, "Hi, I'm Gardner." He's got to go and tell some lies. He introduced himself as a Royal Arch Mason with a doctorate from the University of Singapore. Okay, yeah. The two old occultists seemed to get along well, and and Gardner visited Crowley 3 more times on his own on the 7th, the 14th, and the 27th of May. Very little is known about what went on between Crowley and Gardner, during those visits. First people, you could just assume what they're going to be talking about. They're 2 occultists. So, I mean...
The occult?
Yeah, probably talking about the occult. I lost my place.
The 2 called occultists.
Yes.
We're talking about the occult.
In the letters and documents from that time that remain, a vague picture emerges of Gerald Gardner working with Aleister Crowley in an attempt to form a camp of the OTO in England. Both Gardner and Crowley seem enthusiastic, operating quickly over the space of only a few months. The documents start with a letter written by Aleister Crowley to Gerald York on May 9th. It says, "This week I have had Dr. Gardner here." Yeah. Dr. Gardner here. I would be grateful if you would send him one of the 4 copies of the Equinox of the Gods, which he has purchased. So there's the first written proof that he received information from Aleister Crowley.
Dun dun dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Like I said, and if he had just been honest and was like, I purchased the Equinox of the Gods from Aleister Crowley, I'd have been fine with it. But he's like, no, I had sex with an old woman on the floor and became a priest. Anyway. So Gardner also became a member of the OTO in May, and his membership is confirmed by 2 accounts of a copy of the Book of Law being purchased, or being presented to Gardner from Crowley. So now he has been presented with the Equinox of the Gods, and he has been presented with the Book of the Law. Okay, so now he has 2 sources of information. The details of the accounts differ, but they agree that the book was presented to Gardner to mark the occasion of his initiation or affiliation with the OTO. Now, these 2 names are a little because we have Gerald Gardner and then we have Carl Germer. Okay. Carl Germer, who was the OTO treasurer at the time, also made note that Gardner had paid the requisite dues and fees in order to join. After his formal entrance into the order, probably on May 14th, Gerald Gardner created a charter that would allow him to operate an OTO encampment in London. The words were written in Gardner's distinctive spidery calligraphy. And so Gardner wrote this down. Now, tell me if some of this sounds familiar.
Sure.
Do what thou wilt shall be the law.
Oh, yeah.
We, 10th degree OTO Sovereign Grand Master General of all English speaking countries of the earth, do hereby authorize our beloved son, and he went by his magical name, which was Scire, but it was Gerald Gardner, Prince of Jerusalem, to constitute a camp of the OTO in the degree of Minerval love is the law. Love under will witness. Love under will witness my hand and seal. And then it's like whatever Crowley's magical name was. It was like Baphomet. Baphomet X, which is 10th degree.
You know what Baphomet is, right?
No.
The name all.
What?
The name all.
The devil?
The name all.
Madonna.
I was like, I didn't know what you, like, I was like, what?
I'd Google it to make sure, but my phone's not wanting to.
Yeah. The charter bore Crowley's signature and a number of heavy wax seals bound to ribbons. What it indicates is that Gardner is authorized to found an operating group of the OTO that is empowered to initiate members into the Minerval or lowest degree. It also,
That's a horrible name for.
I know.
For noobs.
It also indicates that Gardner, by that time, had been elevated as far as a side degree of OTO, fourth degree. So he was 4th degree, which is a Prince of Jerusalem. If you were 4th degree, you're a Prince of Jerusalem.
All right.
This degree is also described as Companion of the Holy Royal Arch of Enoch.
Sure.
Since OTO,
There's an awful lot of biblical stuff,
and that's what I'm saying. Like, and that, like, you can't say that Wicca, that like other religion, like Christianity, stole from Wicca. Like, it's just so many fucking Christian references through all of this. But anyway, he did admit Gardner to the level of fourth degree under a process of affiliation, because Gardner had identified himself as a royal arch mason, which he lied about. So he lied his way over the first 3 degrees.
He lied out of his lying liar hole.
Yes.
He sits on a throne of lies.
Yes.
A throne.
On December 1st, 1947, Aleister Crowley died. Okay, so now...
But did he really?
Dun, dun, dun! So...
He probably died so he could resurrect himself.
Yeah.
That's some crappy bull.
Immediately after his death, Crowley's associates were in contact with each other, trying to clear up his lingering debts and to settle his estate, which would have included the OTO, okay? Or the AA, or whatever he was called at that point. Within these letters, there are clues that may shed some light on how Gardner manipulated his and Crowley's relationship.
Yes.
On hearing of Crowley's death, Gardner immediately sent a hasty letter to Vernon Simmons stating, Aleister gave me a charter making me the head of the OTO in Europe.
What?
Yeah. Yep. In that letter, Gardner asked about the addresses of Crowley's literary executors so that he could contact them to buy any relics and transcripts of rituals relating to Crowley. He said that he did not want them to fall into other people's hands.
Sure.
He did not, in fact, have a charter naming him as Crowley's successor. Nevertheless, the OTO was in disarray for a short time after Crowley died, and Frieda Harris wrote to, remember we talked about Carl Germer earlier?
Yes.
It was like the treasurer. She wrote to him and informed him that Gardner was the head of the OTO, presumably passing on the claim that Gardner himself had stated, when he first wrote to the, it's like, hey, like, I'm the successor, So she wrote a letter, and, based on what she had heard, and it says, Gardner is the head of the OTO in Europe. E. Noel Fitzgerald, which was like someone that like kept books for Crowley, I believe, if I'm remembering who he is, seems to have been asked to initiate Mr. Gardner and may be a member of the OTO. So she was saying like, hey, like, this is what I've been told. Is this correct? And what she was trying to figure out is like, we may need to initiate him to the highest levels, because like he can't be the ruler of the OTO and not be at the highest level. So
right.
Harris's comment regarding his initial, like I said, it was like, do we need to do this? Gardner had immediately started identifying himself as a 10th degree.
Yeah.
Because he felt he was going to, he was now going to be the leader. However, after this letter, mention of Gardner seems to fall off for about a month. During that time, it seems that some matters regarding the OTO's leadership had been sorted out. Crowley had, in fact, been grooming his successors since 1944. He favored Carl Germer overall, which was the treasurer. But he was also sensitive to Germer's advanced age and possible shortcomings. To that end, he also attempted to prepare Grady McMurdy to be a kind of acting head of the order,
Sure.
over whom Germer would maintain veto power until his death. Now this goes to show you like how much he did not want Gardner being in charge. He was like, I'm going to name the treasurer, who's old as fuck, to be in charge, but I know he's going to die, so I'm going to name this other guy to be next in line. But he also considered the possibility of McMurdy's death, and had mentioned to Frederick Mellinger that he should hold himself ready for the possibility that he may have to succeed Germer. So he named
3 people,
3 successors, so that Gardner couldn't get his hands on it. And meanwhile, you have Gardner over here, like, writing a letter as fast as he can get it to go across the fucking ocean. Like, I'm Like,
It was me.
yeah. So, I mean, that's pretty fucking shady. At the time that Gardner was writing his letter in attempt to secure Crowley's various papers relating to the OTO, those papers were being shipped to Germer as per Crowley's wishes. So Crowley died knowing that Gardner was going to try to get those papers. And he immediately told his executors, no, you need to get them and get them, to Germer.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the people in his inner circle knew him.
Yeah.
For them to do that. Germer successfully assumed the leadership of the OTO and maintained it until his death in 1962. Germer did eventually authorize a camp of the OTO in England, but it wasn't under Gardner.
Right.
And that's what Gardner had been trying to do. He gave it to Kenneth Grant instead. The OTO was on shaky ground for some time after Germer's death in the 60s, and it later splintered over issues surrounding McMurdy's claim to power. The OTO eventually settled into two respective groups that have since maintained a relatively small but successful presence throughout the world. However, in early 1948, Germer was just coming to terms with his role that he would have to assume, and it seems that Gardner was also thinking seriously about his role in the order and wanted to start to distance himself from it and Crowley. So here's Gardner, and he's like, I've got all I can get out of this group. I have been effectively shut out. I'm not going to be able to get anything more, so now I want to try to start distancing myself from it. In mid-January, Gardner wrote to Carl Germer and asked to meet with him on March 19th in New York. It was later reported that, because Gardner, he liked to, spin a tale. And he liked to, make himself seem like he was more important than what he had actually been. And later, when he talked about that meeting with Germer, who was leading the OTO at that point, instead of Gardner, because Gardner wanted it, he said that when he went to America, he found that many people regarded him, like Gardner, as Crowley's successor. And he's like, oh, but I'm nothing of the sort. I was never... So, he tried to make it seem like when he went to America, all these people was like, oh, no, Gardner, you should be the leader. He's like, oh, but I'm not. This shows Gardner's attempt to distance himself from Crowley. And then after returning to England, Gardner wrote and informed, because it's okay. So he went to America. He met with the leader of the OTO, and when he come back, he tried once again to recognize himself as the head of the OTO in Europe.
What?
Yeah. Germer, he could have endorsed Gardner's claim and instructed him to continue his plans to start an encampment in England, but this encampment never materialized. Now, whether, it was because he was shut out because he's once again lying, who knows? But, he went over, met with him, insisted that while he was over there, everyone in America was like, oh, you should be the ruler, you should be the leader. And then he come back and he said, I was given permission to start an encampment of the OTO here. And
wow.
The OTO was still like, no, you wasn't. Stop already.
No, you weren't.
Yeah. So, who knows? So at this point, we're kind of up to the 1950s now, and you can see how he's met all these people. He's been gathering all this information. He's been lying his way into these inner circles of these pretty secretive sects. So in the 1950s, when the public began questioning whether or not he stole from Crowley, Gardner started disassociating himself from Crowley in favor of Wicca. Gardner claimed that the rituals which he possessed were the original ones that had been practiced by witches for centuries. Yet it has been demonstrated that they are composed of material from a variety of sources, but most notably, the majority of it was Aleister Crowley's work. Okay. There are plenty of examples, but the most obvious is similarities between Gardner's Wiccan third degree and Crowley's, how do you say this one? Gnostic. Gnostic Mass. If you look those two up, if you look up Gardner's Wiccan third degree, and then you look up Crowley's Gnostic Mass, they are almost fucking word for word. Like, almost fucking word for word the same exact thing. And it's like...
I'm feeling dirtier and dirtier.
I know. And it's like... And that's what, like, everyone just... They eat, like, the story that Gardner put out there of how this happened, and it's not fucking true. It's not true. And I'm not saying he didn't, like, everything that he has put together. Well, and even that, he didn't fucking put shit together. Doreen did.
That's true.
Doreen took the all of this shit that he stole from everyone else and put it in a sensible, reasonable format that could be taught.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're not there yet. Yeah, no, blah, blah, blah. So look that up. Look up the Gardner's Wiccan Third Degree and Crowley's Gnostic Mass. They're almost fucking word for word. And the Gnostic Mass was written like back in 1910 or some shit. Like way before Gardner started.
Yeah.
You know, so whatever. But knowing that his plagiarism would be discovered eventually, Gardner attempts to create a cover story in his work Witchcraft Today. So this is what Gardner said in Witchcraft Today to try to explain away why his stuff and Crowley's stuff are so similar. He said, "The only man I can think who could have invented the rites was the late Aleister Crowley. When I met him, he was most interested to hear that I was a member and said that he had been inside when he was very young, but would not say whether he had rewritten anything or not. But the witch practices are entirely different in method from any kind of magic he wrote about. And he described very many kinds. There are indeed certain expressions and certain words used which smack of Crowley. Possibly he borrowed things from the cult writings, or more likely someone may have borrowed expressions from him." So basically, like, he was trying to say that like Crowley was a part of this ancient Wicca religion when he was a child, and he then went forth and shared the information when he was not supposed to share it. I'm now doing the same thing,
but it's okay.
But it's okay. You know, so I mean, like that's the best he could come up with. Was like, well, our stuff sounds similar because when he was a child, he must have been in Wicca. So you know, it was Gardner who was a member of Crowley's organization, not the other way around. Okay, because he was trying to say, like, by saying that, oh, he must have been in Wicca when he was a child.
Yeah.
You know, but no, it was the other way around. He knew perfectly well that these expressions did not merely smack of Crowley. Whole passages were lifted verbatim. It is entirely likely that Gardner once stood bound hand and foot, blindfolded, and had a sword applied to his body, and later heard the words of the star goddess, "I give unimaginable joys upon earth, certainty, not faith, while in life, upon death, peace unutterable, rest, ecstasy, nor do I demand aught in sacrifice." So, like, that's exactly what happens at the Minerval initiation of the OTO.
You know, I gotta say, hearing all this stuff has just confirmed why I'm not Wiccan.
Yeah. See, now, you know, like, because obviously, like, I've talked a little bit here and there about things that, like, really pissed me off about Gardner. But there's a lot. There's a lot, and that's why I don't like him, you know. So, but that, you know, that little thing that I just read is exactly what happens in the Minerval initiation of the OTO, which we know he did. That, you know, he was initiated in at the Minerval level before he lied and was able to be pushed up to 4th degree. So, more tellingly, in the course of the Minerval, the candidate is given a copy of the Book of Law and is instructed to study it. It is thus impossible to pretend that Gardner was not intimately familiar with the Crowley texts. And yet he tries to pretend that Crowley was a Wiccan in his youth. This in order to gull the reader into thinking that Crowley may have written the rituals himself. And of course, he waited until Crowley was good and dead.
Oh, of course.
before he started saying that. And in case anyone is tempted to think that there might be any substance to that whatsoever, the Gnostic Mass I was talking about, like it was written, it's right here, it was written in 1911, long after his youth, when he would have supposedly been in Wicca. Gardner actually patched together Wicca from Crowley's writings and other sources. And then as for Gardner being a dirty old man,
Oh yeah.
this is the last little bit. He abused women by making them subservient to men, making the priest to name the priestess or initiate her. This may not be what is in most Wiccan covens today, but this is what the founder of Wicca intended. In fact, Gardner made it law within the coven that when a high priestess reached a certain age, she would have to relinquish her position to a younger, more beautiful woman to be initiated into the coven through the great rite, where he would then freely part her thighs and gratefully initiate his penis into her vagina.
That's messed up.
He hired a prostitute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he so like that right there, like when we get to that point right there, and that's like all I have that like I actually researched, and I will just kind of talk about what I know. Like when we reach that point, because what he would say is like, you know, when you reach your third degree, then, you know, to be in order to become a priestess, high priestess, whatever, you would then have to symbolically perform the great rite with the priest, and he was the priest, like the high priest of the coven. So every single woman that reached that point had sex with him.
That's gross.
Would have to have ritualistic sex with him in front of everybody. You
That's
know,
gross.
and then when he decided that, you know, the priestess was getting too old, she was entering into her crone phase, so she would be replaced with a maiden, and they would have to then again perform the great rite with him in order to be named like the high priestess of the coven.
That's messed up.
And then, you know, he finally, because Doreen Valiente was one of his high priestesses.
Yeah.
And she's the one that kind of changed everything. She's the one that stepped in and was like, okay, we're going to take all of this information. She didn't know that he had stolen it. She completely bought in to his story of how he got this information. But she's the one that pulled it all together and made it make sense. She rewrote a lot of the things because of the Crowley accusations.
Yeah.
She rewrote a lot of the rituals and stuff that they had been using. But she was like, I'm not going to perform the great rite with you. I think that she has in the past. But I think just through her going through all of the information and putting it like together in a way it makes sense, she was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't necessary. Like, you've just been having sex with all of us. You know. So she refused to do the great rite with him anymore. And she was like, we'll symbolically do it. And we'll hold a chalice, and we'll hold an athame, and we'll put the athame in the chalice, and that's, you know, a representation of the great rite. But when she refused to do it, he refused, instead of respecting his high priestess, he refused to let the great rite be symbolic, and hired a prostitute to come in and have sex with him instead during the great rite.
In front of everybody?
In front of everybody. And to me, like that, and that right there, I think, because, you know, obviously you and I used to worship deity. We don't anymore, but we used to. And that part of the story always really bothered me because, you know, when you're performing, like the great rite, if you're actually doing the great rite, then one of you is representing the goddess and one of you is representing the god. Mm-hmm. And you're going to take a prostitute and have her represent your goddess. You're going to shove aside your high priestess who you're supposed to follow and revere above everybody else. And you're going to replace her with a prostitute and let her represent your goddess.
Mm-hmm.
I know that has always bothered me about him. So yeah, I mean, like, it just like she, I mean, when she said earlier, when the Offspring said earlier, she kind of did that recap of, you know, basically what he is. I don't think it was as simple as him just wanting to have sex with Edith. I think he wanted to have sex with as many people as he could. And I think he wanted to be revered and worshipped.
Yeah, my first husband.
Yeah, he wanted, and so that's why I'm not saying he didn't believe in the things that he was doing. I'm not going to say that he didn't believe in a god and a goddess, and he didn't believe, because I don't know. I just know that his route to get there, and how he covered it up, and he actively, because if you read Everyday Witch, his book Everyday Witch, he that barely mentions Crowley in there at all, and that's where the majority of his shit's stolen from.
Yeah.
So obviously you wouldn't name the person you stole the majority of your shit from in your book telling how this came to be.
Yeah.
And then you add the fact that, like, you can't prove who Dorothy Clutterbuck is. I mean, it's just like all of it's a lie. And people every day, I'm not just going to say Wiccans, because there's some plain pagans who believe this story as well. But there's so many loopholes in it. There's so many fucking loopholes. And then when you lay it out like that and you connect all of these people from one person to the next person to the next person, you're like, goddamn, motherfucker.
Literally.
Yeah. Well, anyway. So, I mean, that was my gripe. What time are we at?
I don't know.
Hour and a half. Wasn't as long as I thought it was going to be. I think it's because I cut out a lot of the Aleister Crowley.
Well, I want to know about the Webster County beams.
Oh, yeah. I told you. I was like, I want to tell you about the Webster County beams, but I'm not going to tell you about the Webster County beams, so we're on a podcast, okay?
Wait, is it done?
Well, we're done with the Crowley
Is it
part.
still on?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay.
So, Webster County. I think people probably saw in the group, me talking about, like, just assuming that just because there's pot smoked at Webster County football games that, like, it's smoked at every single football game all over. Like, that was just what I thought. But,
It's not.
okay. Things are done a little differently in Webster County. So I started, because I have several friends, and family members from Webster County that's on my Facebook. And I start seeing these posts reporting where the beams were at. And I'm like, what? Like, I'm from Webster, and I was like, what?
Yeah.
So I'm like, what? And then it was like, I think it had even been reported on, like, the Webster County 911 page. And, like, apparently, because they're replacing this bridge in Webster. And they were bringing the beams in to build the new bridge.
Okay.
And the beam was so fucking long that it got stuck in a curve because they didn't bring the right type of trailer so that they could maneuver the beam.
Okay.
So it became this big thing that the beam was stuck for hours. And, like, everyone's like, traffic stopped and, like you can't get in or out of Webster because the beam's blocking the road. But then it became Beam Watch 2019. So as soon as they got the beam unstuck and it started its journey once again, they had been updating when they saw it pass their home.
Wow.
And they were like, and there was, like, pictures of it on the side of the road and, like, pictures of it at night and, like, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why?
Hey.
That's what I'm saying. A small town, man.
Hey, what happened to the goat? Did the goat die? Is it the Powell Mountain goat?
Powell Mountain goat. That's not Webster County. That's Nicholas County.
I know, but did it die? Because I saw a post where they think it's dead.
I think people are assuming it's dead because it hasn't been seen, like, for almost a year now.
I haven't seen it in a while.
Yeah.
The rogue
Powell Mountain Billy Goat. And it had its own Facebook page if you guys want to go look it up. Powell Mountain, Powell, Powell Mountain Billy Goat. And basically that was this goat that kept escaping a farm. And you would see it on the side of the 4-lane all the time.
Yeah.
On Route 19.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, like, it ended up having, like, a girlfriend or a boyfriend at some point.
Didn't they drop it off a friend?
Yeah.
But the friend couldn't survive.
Yeah. I got, like, ate by a bear or a coyote or something. I don't know.
But that's sad.
Yeah. But, I mean, that's small town. Like, that's small town West Virginia. You get excited over a beam and you watch a goat.
Hey, one time up in Summersville, you know that little area where, like, the butcher's at and the pet store?
Oh, yeah.
I was up there and saw somebody bringing 2 goats out of the pet groomer.
Yes.
I was like, wait, what?
It's like they needed a little sensual massage. It's a goat.
Should I be disturbed? I feel like I should be concerned.
Nah.
Oh, can you explain what that Mason thing is now?
Later. Like, I'm not going to do it on the podcast. So you had it was so funny. You had been ranting.
I'll rant later.
Oh, you want to share that rant later?
Yes.
Can I be a part of it?
It's pretty funny.
Can I be a part of this?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm not going to do it right now.
Yeah. Okay.
You need to be angry to do it.
Yes.
So, anyway, Gerald Gardner sucks. People in Webster County got excited about a beam.
And the Powell Mountain goat
Is dead.
I hope it's just like hiding, and here someday soon it's going to be like, surprise.
Well, it had to have been pretty fucking old.
I don't know.
No, I mean, yeah, it had to have been pretty fucking old. Like, it was around back when I was like a senior in high school. I graduated in 2000. There's no fucking way that was the same goat all this time.
Oh, come on. It might have been.
And if it was, that's why it explains he's dead now.
I thought it was a girl.
He, she, goat, I don't know.
It's a goat.
The goat.
It's a goat.
So, yeah.
I don't know.
Do you have anything else to add other than Gardner was skeevy?
No, I'm a little traumatized right now.
Yeah.
The religion sounds really messed up.
Yeah. We stopped following Gardner, or not Gardner, but Wicca
Thank God.
a long time ago.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
What do you mean, thank God? There is no God.
I had a good point.
Anyway.
Thank the universe.
There you go. Thank the universe.
That's an awful lot to say.
Yeah.
Like,
I tell you, I use Jesus Christ's name a lot.
in vain.
Well, yeah, but I'm still saying, we joke about that all the time. Like, we're going to get up and like we're going to, if we're wrong, we're going to get up to heaven and Jesus is going to be there and be like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, you have used my name in vain more than any other person on the entire fucking planet. Like, well, we didn't think he was real. Jesus. Fuck. Anyway.
I'd just be like, hey, I was saved when I was a kid, so according to the Bible, I should be good.
Yeah. This podcast was very heavy on information. We haven't done one that heavy on information in quite a while. But the next podcast is going to be very interesting. So
Can I be a part of it?
you guys need to stay tuned for that when we record it. And you can find us on the internet at featherandbone.net. There you have access to the Facebook group. You can buy tarot readings from us. And Rain sells Avon. That's on there. I'm telling you, I want somebody to buy Avon from you. I don't fucking...
They're not gonna.
I don't care. Like, you guys need to buy... The perfume that I wear is the Prima Noir. It is delicious. Like, every single person who ever... Like they're always like, oh my God, what are you wearing? It is, like, the best fucking perfume ever.
I have, like, 2 family members that buy from me. I buy it.
I buy it.
You buy it. I have, like, 6 people.
You're a beautician.
Yeah.
I'm just
And then
here.
an old lady at the beautician shop.
Yes.
I'm just here.
So, I seriously doubt I'm going to become, like, a Avon high roller or anything.
I don't... You need to be the high priestess of Avon. That's my new...
Sure.
That's my new, that's my new goal.
Aren't I, like, Avalon or something like that on your phone?
Yes, you are Avalon on my phone, and the story behind that is that they picked out your magical name for you instead of allowing you to have your own, and it was a veil cat. But if you pronounced a veil the way that it's traditionally meant to be pronounced, because it's Celtic, it's evil. So you were evil cat. And you were like, no, I don't want to be evil cat. I don't want to be a veil cat. And you're like, if I have to be something that starts with an A, like, we're just going to low-key just start calling me by something else.
That's right. We agreed you were going to start calling me something else.
I was just going to start calling you Avalon.
Until everybody else caught on.
And, and I was like, I'll just start calling you Avalon and sign all of your homework Avalon. And... yeah, so that's how that came about. Mm-hmm. So I put you in my phone. It's like your real name and then Avalon. So when I call you, I have to say, like my voice thing in the car, I say your real name and then Avalon.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Poor Asen.
I know.
You were just like, no. I'm going to be called something else. And we just start doing it. I remember the first couple times that I said Avalon.
Uh-huh.
And he corrected me. He's like, no, it's a veil. And I'm like, Avalon. I feel sorry for him sometimes.
He put up with us.
Yeah. And that just speaks to his character.
He probably, I know he had to drink a lot of coffee.
Yeah. Smoke a lot of cigarettes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, you can find us on the internet, like I said earlier. Remember, it's magic, motherfuckers.